I thought I knew my family. I really did. Growing up in Pennsylvania with my older brother Derek, we had our moments, sure, but I never imagined he would betray me the way he did. The night my father screamed at me to leave rain hammering against the windows, I felt my whole world shatter. But what hurt even more was discovering 2 weeks later that Derek had been laughing about it, proud of what he had done. He just did not know Mom was standing right there listening to every single word. I never thought he would go that far. Before I dive into what happened that night in the storm, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you have ever dealt with family betrayal, hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you will want to see how this plays out. My name is Ezekiel, and at 27 years old, I thought I had finally made it. I worked as a software engineer at a solid tech company in Philadelphia, and just 3 months before everything fell apart, I had been promoted to a senior position. It was not just about the money or the title. It was about proving to myself and maybe to my father, Harold, that I could build something real. Growing up, Dad had always been the kind of man who measured success in concrete terms. Paychecks, promotions, achievements you could point to and say, that is mine. Derek, my older brother by 3 years, had taken a different path. He bounced between sales jobs, never quite finding his footing. 1 month, he would be selling insurance, the next, he would be pitching timeshares or working some multi-level marketing scheme that promised the world but delivered nothing. I never judged him for it. We all find our way at different speeds, but Derek saw it differently. Every time I shared good news at our Friday night family dinners, I could see something flicker in his eyes. Something dark and resentful. Our mother, Patricia, was the glue that held us together, or at least tried to. She had this gentle way of smoothing over tension, always finding the kind words when Dad got too harsh, or when Derek's sarcasm cut too deep. She would pat my hand under the table when Derek made one of his comments, her way of saying, "Just let it go, sweetheart." Those Friday dinners at my parents' house in suburban Pennsylvania were supposed to be sacred. Mom would cook pot roast or her famous meatloaf, and we would sit around the same oak table where Derek and I had done our homework as kids. For years it worked. We showed up, we ate, we pretended everything was fine. But about 6 months before the storm, I started noticing the shift. Derek's comments became sharper, less playful. When I mentioned my promotion over dinner one evening, Dad clapped me on the shoulder and said something like, "That is my boy, always knew you had it in you." I glanced at Derek, hoping to see him smile, maybe offer congratulations. Instead, he stared down at his plate, jaw tight, knuckles white around his fork. After a long silence, he muttered, "Easy to succeed when everything falls into your lap." The words stung more than I wanted to admit. I tried to brush it off, even offered to take him out for beers the following weekend, just the two of us. Maybe we could talk, really talk about what was eating at him. He declined with a cold, "No thanks," and left early that night. Mom watched him go with worry creased across her forehead, but she did not say anything. None of us did. 2 weeks before the storm that would change everything, Derek showed up at my apartment near downtown Philadelphia. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was surprised to see him. We had barely spoken since that awkward dinner. He stood in my doorway, looking exhausted shadows under his eyes, his usual confidence nowhere to be found. He needed money. $3,000 to be exact. His landlord was threatening eviction, and he had already burned through his savings trying to stay afloat between jobs. I did not hesitate. He was my brother. I pulled out my checkbook, wrote the amount, and handed it to him. Pay me back when you can, I told him. There was no interest, no contract, just trust between brothers. He took the check, and for a moment I thought I saw something strange pass over his face. Something I could not quite read. "Thanks, little brother," he said, his tone almost mocking, and then he left. The following week felt off. I called him a couple of times to check in, see how he was doing. No answer. He did not show up to a small family gathering Mom organized for Dad's birthday. When I asked Mom if she had heard from him, she just shook her head and said, "I am sure he is fine, honey, probably just busy." But her eyes told a different story. She was worried, too. That night, she pulled me aside in the kitchen and asked quietly, "Is everything okay between you two?" I lied and said yes, even though my gut was screaming that something was terribly wrong. The storm started building that Friday afternoon. I could see the dark clouds rolling in as I drove from work to my parents' house for our weekly dinner. The air felt heavy electric, like the world was holding its breath. I parked in the driveway and noticed Derek's car was already there. Good, I thought. Maybe we could finally clear the air talk through whatever tension had been growing between us. But the moment I stepped through the front door, I knew something was horribly wrong. The usual warmth of Mom's cooking and the hum of the television were replaced by a thick, suffocating silence. Dad stood in the middle of the living room, his face flushed red, veins bulging in his neck. I had seen him angry before, but never like this. Behind him, Derek stood with his arms crossed, his expression a careful mask of concern and hurt. "How could you do this to your own brother?" Dad shouted before I could even take off my jacket. His voice bounced off the walls and I felt my stomach drop. Do what I asked, genuinely confused. I looked at Derek, searching his face for some clue, some explanation. He would not meet my eyes. Dad took a step toward me, shaking with rage. "Derek told me everything, Ezekiel. Everything. You stole his business idea. You took what he trusted you with and sold it to his competitor for profit. How could you betray your own flesh and blood like that?" The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs. "What, Dad, that is insane." I turned to Derek, my voice rising. "What are you talking about? I never stole anything from you." Derek's face crumpled and he actually started to cry, real tears streaming down his face. "I trusted you," he said, his voice breaking. "I told you about my startup idea 2 months ago, remember? Over coffee, I shared everything with you. The market research, the business plan. And then I find out you went behind my back and sold it to my competitor." He covered his face with his hands, shoulders shaking. I was so stunned I could barely form words. "Derek, that never happened. I do not even know what business idea you're talking about. We have not had coffee together in months." He pulled out his phone, hands trembling, and showed Dad something on the screen. "Emails," he said. "Text messages. All the proof I need." Dad took the phone, his face hardening as he scrolled. I tried to get closer to see what Derek had fabricated, but Dad pulled away. "I have seen enough," he said, his voice ice cold. The disappointment in his eyes cut deeper than any anger could have. Mom stood near the kitchen doorway, twisting a dish towel in her hands. Her face was pale, torn between her husband and her son. "Patricia," I called to her, "you know me. You know I would never do something like this." But she just stood there, silent, unable or unwilling to intervene. Outside, the first drops of rain began to hit the windows. Thunder rumbled in the distance. I tried again to explain, to reason with Dad, but he was not listening. Derek had done his work well. Whatever evidence he had manufactured, whatever story he had spun, Dad believed every word of it. "Get out of my house," Dad finally said, pointing toward the door. The rain was coming down harder now, streaking the windows. "Dad, please," I begged. "Just listen to me for 1 minute. Let me explain." "You are not welcome here," he shouted louder this time. "Not until you make this right. Not until you admit what you have done and apologize to your brother." I looked at Derek one last time. For just a split second, our eyes met, and I saw it. A flash of satisfaction. A tiny smirk playing at the corner of his mouth that Dad could not see from his angle. In that moment, I knew. This was not a misunderstanding. This was deliberate, calculated. My own brother had set me up, and he was enjoying watching me fall. Mom finally moved, reaching out to touch my arm. "Maybe you should go," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "Let him cool down. We can talk about this later." But I knew there would be no later, not tonight. I grabbed my jacket and walked toward the door. The rain was torrential now, sheets of water pouring from the sky. I paused at the threshold, looking back one more time. Dad had his back to me, his whole body rigid with anger and disappointment. Derek stood beside him, one hand on Dad's shoulder in a gesture of false comfort, and Mom just stood there helpless. I stepped out into the storm. Within seconds, I was soaked through rain pounding against my skin, mixing with tears I did not even realize I was crying. I walked to my car, every step feeling like I was moving through concrete. Before I got in, I looked back at the house through the rain-streaked windows. Inside, I could see Derek hugging Dad, consoling him while Dad covered his face with his hands. The perfect, concerned brother. The perfect lie. I drove away the storm, raging around me with nowhere to go and no idea how to fix what had just been broken. I ended up at my friend Marcus's place in Brooklyn. He had been my roommate in college, one of those friends who never asks questions when you show up on their doorstep at 11 at night, drenched and defeated. He took one look at me and said, "Come in, man," then handed me a towel and a beer. We sat in his living room and I told him everything. The money, the lies, the storm, the look on Derek's face. Marcus listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he just shook his head. "That is messed up, bro. But truth always comes out. Just give it time." His words were meant to comfort me, but I felt hollow. How do you prove something did not happen? How do you fight against fabricated evidence and a brother willing to destroy you? The next 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I tried calling my parents multiple times. Dad never answered. Mom picked up once, but her voice was strained, uncomfortable. "Your father needs time," she said softly. "I am sorry, Ezekiel." Then she hung up. I sent emails trying to explain, laying out timelines, showing that Derek's story did not add up. Nothing. Radio silence. I threw myself into work, but even that felt hollow. My promotion, my success, everything I had been proud of suddenly felt meaningless. What was the point of achieving anything if the people who mattered most did not believe in you? I started having trouble sleeping. Every night I would replay that scene in my parents' living room, searching for something I could have said or done differently. But there was nothing. Derek had planned this perfectly. Marcus let me crash on his couch without complaint. He would come home from work and find me staring at my laptop, going through old messages with Derek, trying to find anything that might help my case. There was nothing. Derek had never mentioned any business idea to me. We barely talked about anything substantial anymore. The whole thing was fiction. But then, 10 days after the storm, Mom called. Her voice was different. Quiet, but with an edge I had not heard before. "Ezekiel," she said, "I need to talk to you. Can you come to the house on Wednesday afternoon? Your father will be at work." There was something in her tone that made my heart race. Had she finally started to doubt Derek's story? Wednesday afternoon, I drove back to Pennsylvania, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Mom met me at the door, her face drawn and tired. "Come in, sweetheart," she said, glancing nervously up and down the street. We sat in the kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd eaten thousands of meals growing up, and she told me her suspicions. Something about Derek's story did not sit right with her. Small inconsistencies. The way he had been too eager to show Dad the evidence. The way he had pushed so hard to get me kicked out immediately. "I want to believe you," she said, reaching across the table to take my hand. "But I need proof. I need to know for certain." We talked for over an hour, and together we came up with a plan. It felt wrong, sneaky, like something out of a movie. But I was desperate. Mom agreed to place a small voice recorder in the living room, hidden behind some books on the shelf. Derek came by most Saturday afternoons to check on Dad. Maybe he would slip up. I drove back to Brooklyn with a tiny flicker of hope. It was a long shot, but it was something. That Saturday, I sat in Marcus's apartment staring at my phone, waiting. Mom had texted me that morning, "Recorder is set. Derek is coming over at 2. The hours crawled by. 3 o'clock came and went, then 4. My phone finally rang at 4:30, and it was Mom. Her voice was shaken, but not with sadness, with rage. "Come home," she said. "Your father needs to hear the truth." When I got to the house, an hour later, Dad's car was already in the driveway. He had rushed home from work. I walked in to find Mom sitting on the couch, her face pale but determined. Dad sat across from her, looking confused and worried. And there, standing by the window, was Derek. His face had gone white. "Sit down," Ezekiel, Mom said gently. She had her phone in her hand, connected to a small Bluetooth speaker on the coffee table. "I am going to play something." She looked at Derek. "And I want you to listen very carefully." She pressed play. At first, there was just ambient noise, the sound of someone moving around the living room. Then Derek's voice, clear as day, talking on his phone to someone. You should have seen his face when Dad kicked him out. Priceless. There was laughter in his voice, genuine amusement. Easiest $3,000 I ever made. He lent me money. I made him look like the bad guy, and now I am the golden child. More laughter. Dad will never trust him again. I finally won. The recording continued. Derek explaining in detail how he had faked the emails, edited screenshots, created an entire fictional business idea just to frame me. It went on for nearly 3 minutes. When it finally stopped, the silence in the room was deafening. Dad sat, frozen, his face cycling through disbelief, shock, and finally a deep, devastating hurt. He turned slowly to look at Derek. "How could you?" he whispered. "How could you do this to your own brother?" To this family, Derek tried to speak, his mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. Finally, he managed, "Dad, I can explain. It was a joke I did not mean." Mom stood up, her voice cutting through his excuses like a knife. "Do not you dare lie to me again, Derek. I heard every word, every single word." She looked at him with such disappointment that even I felt it. "You destroyed your brother's reputation, tore this family apart, and for what money, jealousy?" Derek's face crumpled. He looked at me, then at Dad, then back at Mom. I have always been in his shadow. Everything comes so easy for him, and I am always struggling, always failing. I needed Dad stood up, and I had never seen him look so old, so tired. "That is no excuse," he said, his voice breaking. "That is no excuse for what you have done." He walked over to me, placed both hands on my shoulders, and looked me in the eye. "I am so sorry, son. I should have listened to you. I should have trusted you." Tears were running down his face, and seeing my father cry broke something in me. I pulled him into a hug. "I understand, Dad," I said, even though part of me was still angry, still hurt. "He is your son, too. You wanted to believe him." Dad held me tight, then turned back to Derek. "You will transfer that $3,000 back to your brother tonight," he said, his voice regaining some of its strength. "And you will apologize to him, to all of us, for what you have done. Furthermore, I am cutting off your financial support. It is time you learn to stand on your own 2 feet without tearing others down." Derek looked stricken, but he nodded. He mumbled an apology, though it sounded hollow and forced. Then he grabbed his jacket and left the door closing quietly behind him. The 3 of us sat in the living room for a long time after that, not saying much, just processing what had happened. The months that followed were a slow process of healing. Derek kept his distance, too ashamed to face any of us. He transferred the money back within a week, along with a longer, more genuine apology via email. I appreciated the gesture, but the trust was gone. Maybe it would come back someday, but I was not holding my breath. Dad and I spent a lot of time rebuilding our relationship. He took me to lunch every other week, and we talked about things we had never really discussed before. His own insecurities as a father, his regrets about comparing us as kids, his fear that he had pushed Derek to this point by always holding me up as the example. I assured him that Derek's choices were his own, but I understood where Dad was coming from. We were both learning, both growing. Mom became my fiercest advocate. She made it clear to everyone in our extended family what had really happened, setting the record straight. She also sat Derek down by himself and had a long conversation with him about jealousy, integrity, and the importance of family. I do not know everything they discussed, but Derek sent me a text afterward saying he was starting therapy. That felt like a step in the right direction. As for me, I focused on moving forward. I got back into my routine at work and even earned another promotion 6 months later. I started dating a woman named Allison, a project manager at a partner company. She was kind, funny, and refreshingly honest. When I told her about what had happened with Derek, she listened without judgment and said that must have been incredibly painful. But look at how you handled it. You did not let it destroy you. Her words meant more to me than she probably realized. I also joined a support group for people dealing with family estrangement and betrayal. Sitting in a circle with strangers who had been through similar pain helped me realize I was not alone. We shared stories, coping strategies, and slowly I started to let go of the anger. Not because Derek deserved my forgiveness, but because carrying that weight was exhausting. I needed to be free of it. One evening, about 8 months after the storm, I sat on my apartment balcony watching the sunset. My phone buzzed with a message from Mom. "Dinner this Friday. Just the 3 of us. Derek is not ready yet, and that is okay. We want to spend time with you." I smiled and replied, "I will be there." Sitting there, watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink, I thought about everything I had learned. I learned that blood does not always mean loyalty. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones capable of hurting you the most. But I also learned that betrayal, as painful as it is, can teach you who truly has your back. Mom had proven herself by refusing to stay silent. Dad had proven himself by admitting his mistake and working to fix it. And I had proven to myself that I could withstand the storm, literally and figuratively, and come out stronger on the other side. I thought about Derek, too. Part of me hoped he would find his way, figure out who he wanted to be, without the shadow of comparison hanging over him. But I also knew that was his journey, not mine. I had done what I could. I had extended trust, offered help, and been willing to forgive. What he did with that was up to him. The most important lesson I carried forward was this: forgiveness is not about the person who hurt you. It is about freeing yourself from the prison of resentment. I could forgive Derek without letting him back into my inner circle. I could move on without forgetting what happened. Trust is earned, not given, and once broken, it takes a long time to rebuild. Maybe Derek and I would get there someday. Maybe we would not. Either way, I was going to be okay. That night in the rain changed everything. But, looking back now, maybe it needed to happen. Because it showed me who really had my back when everything fell apart. It taught me to set boundaries, to trust my instincts, and to value the people who stand by you even when the storm is raging. And, most importantly, it taught me that my worth is not determined by who believes in me. It is determined by who I choose to be when everything falls apart. And I choose to be someone who keeps going, who keeps building, who keeps believing in the goodness that still exists even after betrayal. So, if you have ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, someone you loved, I want you to know that you are not alone. The pain is real, and it is okay to feel it. But do not let it define you. Do not let someone else's choices steal your peace. You are stronger than you think, and one day you will look back and realize that the storm did not destroy you. It just washed away the things that were never meant to stay. Have you ever experienced betrayal from a family member or someone close to you? How did you handle it? Drop your story in the comments below. I would love to hear how you found your way through. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about resilience and growth. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it today. Thank you so much for listening to my story, and I hope wherever you are on your own journey you find the strength to keep moving forward. You deserve peace, you deserve truth, and you deserve people who will stand by you no matter what. Take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next one.